Her voice was sugar and poison. "He's mine now, accept it," she purred, and I didn't shout. I smiled at the zeros I'd already moved, the transfers stamped and sealed, the credit card she loves set to declined. "Keep him," I said, calm as a cashier closing a till, "but check your bank account first." The silence on the line was the first honest thing either of them had given me. I'm Laura. I'm 46, a middle school music teacher who labels the spice jars and pays bills on Fridays. I own 3 cardigans that match every skirt I have, a cello I can only half play, and a dog who snores like a train. Our couch sags in the middle. Our Thursdays are pasta. I used to think steadiness was the reward for being careful. You keep the receipts, you rinse the mugs, you show up, and the world shows up back. Before the storm, my life had rhythms that made sense. First bell at 8:10. Clarinet reeds restocked on payday. 8th graders who groan at scales and then light up when a piece finally clicks. On Sundays, I meal prepped like a tiny parade. Soup in glass jars, cut fruit in labeled containers, 1 pan of roasted vegetables ready to become 3 different dinners. I could tell you where the measuring cups live with my eyes closed. I could pay the gas bill from muscle memory. He had his own rhythms. Tie on the chair, keys in the ceramic dish, the sigh he made before turning on the evening news like he needed to check the temperature of the world before he could sit. He'd kiss the top of my head and ask, "What's for Thursday?" Even when it was always pasta. 8 years married, 2 moves, 1 shared calendar that held birthdays and oil changes and dentist appointments and the date we promised ourselves we'd finally fix the porch light. It wasn't a fancy life, but it was ours, and I liked the way it fit. The cracks were small at first. The phone started living face down. The new cologne he couldn't name. The guys became the reason for everything. Late dinners, weekend plans, an extra Tuesday that suddenly had a meeting no one else had heard of. A second gym bag showed up, always fresh, never used. He laughed too hard when I teased him about cardio. I found a heart on a text that flashed on his smartwatch, and he called it a joke. Jokes don't book hotel rooms, but I didn't know that yet. I only knew that my stomach learned a new kind of knot. I hate the version of me that watches screens. I hate the quiet that grows when you start measuring how long someone takes to answer a simple question. So I did what I do best. I noticed. I wrote small things down where no one would see them. The time he said traffic, but traffic wasn't there on the app. The night the guys suddenly started going to a restaurant where the menu has flowers. I labeled my fear the way I label flour, so it wouldn't spill everywhere. Discovery came like a practical email, not a movie scene. He keeps a shared folder in the cloud for receipts because once early on, I taught him how to file for reimbursements without ruining my Sunday. He forgot the habit existed. A new subfolder appeared labeled August. Inside it, a forwarded hotel confirmation. 2 spa passes, couples massage, rose petals, champagne on ice. Room view guaranteed if you paid in advance. I read the dates twice. I opened our budgeting app. A new card had appeared, not one I added. Purchases shipped to an address I didn't know. An authorized user named only with an initial. K.I. didn't scream. I printed. I kept my hands steady the way I keep them steady over a flustered oboe section. I made coffee and stacked the papers in chronological order. The way a person lines up dominoes, not because she wants to watch them fall, but because she needs to see the pattern. In my car at lunch, I called the number on the hotel email. "I'm the spouse on the reservation," I said. And I said my name plainly, because I refuse to whisper when I'm telling the truth. The concierge used my last name like a soft glove, automatic, practiced, then slid in the detail that mattered. "Oh yes, I see we have a note on the card for Kay." She said the letter and stopped, a pause like a smudge. I let her keep talking. She did. Room type, champagne, couples massage at 4. I thanked her and asked to confirm the card on file, just so the surprise is perfect. She confirmed the joint card for the extras. I canceled the extras. She said, of course, like I'd asked for more towels. At school, the bells kept marking time as if the day were normal. I tuned a trumpet and practiced the breath I tell my students to use when they're shaking. In for 4, out for 8. I set a sticky note on my desk and wrote a list in neat columns. Evidence, money, legal, logistics, plan. Evidence meant screenshots and paper copies and dates in pen. Money meant my paycheck moved to an account in my name only. Alerts set to ping for anything over $10. The joint card limit dropped to grocery level with autopay canceled and utilities rerouted. Legal meant a consult. Logistics meant one small lockbox in a place. To keep a file that would not live on the kitchen counter. Plan meant I would do all of that before I said a single word to a person committed to lying. Friend Eliza put a card in my junk drawer 2 years. I go after her almost divorce became a second chance. If you ever need to talk to someone who talks in forms, not feelings, she said. She's good. I put the card under the coupons and warranty manuals. That night I pulled it out and put it in my purse like an instrument you haven't played in years, but still know how to hold. I slept lightly. Not because I was afraid, because my body was listening. The next morning, I opened a credit union account on my prep period. I moved my direct deposit, set alerts, and added a verbal password no one could guess from social media. I changed the login to my retirement account and closed the tab on the shared laptop, because you should not tempt a person who already believes your passwords belong to them. I filled a manila folder with statements and wrote the month and year on the tab like a librarian who refuses to lose the plot. Elena, the lawyer, met me at noon the following Tuesday. No dramatic decor, a pot of a plant that looked resolute, a pen that didn't leak, a calendar with appointments that didn't apologize. Facts, she said, and I loved her for not asking me how I felt before she asked me what happened. I gave her the facts. The hotel, the card, the K, the shared folder, the receipts with somebody else's coil of handwriting in the signature line. She didn't flinch. She didn't perform the soft pity face people put on when they want credit for hearing you. She told me what to gather and what to ignore. What you've done with your paycheck isn't spite, she said. It's safety. Don't argue. Don't narrate. If he wants to communicate, say, please put it in writing. It saves lives, mostly the part of yours that's tired. I wrote her sentence on a sticky note when I got home and stuck it to the fridge. Then I put my phone face down on the table, not because I was hiding, but because the sound of it had been running my life. He texted an hour later. Poker tonight. Don't wait up. Of course, I wrote back. Words that mean nothing are the easiest to spend. He came home after midnight smelling like wind that had been inside a bar. His phone buzzed on the counter. He turned it over automatically. Muscle memory from a habit he wasn't admitting even to himself. I watched the split second of panic. How even a liar gets a little dizzy in a bright kitchen. I took my dog out and looked at the sky, the way you look at a page before you write. The travel day came. I let it. His suitcase sat by the door like a person who won't meet your eye. He said, "We'll fish," and smiled the way men smile when they think they're managing you. I ironed his shirts and thought of all the women who turned steam into strategy, because it's the only time the house is noisier than the mind. "You're the best," he said. "I don't deserve you." "You don't," I said kindly, which is a sentence that only sounds cruel if you know it's true. When he left, the house exhaled. I made coffee. I dialed the hotel from the car so the dog wouldn't hear my voice go expert calm. I confirmed what needed confirming. I canceled what needed canceling. I said thank you and of course, and wondered how often the person on the other end becomes somebody else's accomplice without meaning to. I don't blame staff who do their jobs. I blame people who make other people part of their lies. At school, I taught the second violins that counting rest measures is a form of courage. A rest is not nothing, I told them. It's your place in the song. I wrote the same reminder for myself in my planner and underlined it twice. On my way home, I stopped at the bank that holds our joint account. I didn't perform a movie montage. I asked for the last 6 months of statements, folded them, put them in my bag, and noted 2 charges that proved what my stomach already knew. A tasting menu for 2 on a Wednesday. A resort gift shop on a morning he said he'd been heads down. A line can be straight and still lead somewhere crooked. I wrote the dates in my notebook because the page doesn't tremble even when your hand does. That night, he sent a photo of a marina and the caption, "Boys trip, lucky me." I responded with a thumbs up. I wish I had a more graceful symbol for "I will not be baited." The call came an hour later, which I know now is about the time the server says, "I'm sorry, your card was declined." Her voice slid across my ear like a ribbon dipped in something sweet that would stain. "He's mine now, accept it," she purred. She wanted theater. She wanted me to audition for Rage. Instead, I thought about the notice I put on the joint card that afternoon. The way the bank pretty much sings when a fraud alert locks a piece of plastic. I thought about the auto pays I'd moved, the new passwords, the way my paycheck already had a safe place to land. I thought about a decade of pasta and a couch that sags and the specific piece of folding a towel exactly in thirds when you're the only one who will notice. I smiled at the zeros I'd already moved, the transfers stamped and sealed. The credit card she loved set to declined. Keep him, I said, because some gifts are heavy and it's kind to let the new owner feel the weight. But check your bank account first. The quiet that followed was the first honest thing either of them had given me. He texted me within 5 minutes, anger wearing all its usual masks. What did you do? This is childish. We can fix this. I didn't let his sentences climb into my chest and live there. I opened my email and wrote one of my own, simple as a metronome. I've moved my income to a personal account. I've removed all authorized users from my credit. The joint card is for household basics only. Attached are copies of charges I didn't authorize. I have a meeting with legal counsel on Tuesday. Please use email for all communication. I hit send. I put my phone down. I fed the dog. I boiled water and salted it like the ocean. I ate the kind of dinner you cook when you want to prove to yourself that your hands know how to care for you, even while your heart learns a new song. He came home ready to perform. Palms up, soft voice. It's not what you think. He held his face like a man who believes his charm can still bend reality if he gets the lighting right. I didn't argue. I've wasted years of Saturdays on arguments that delivered nothing but a hoarse throat. I'm done paying for conversations that don't have receipts. There's a box by the door with your office things, I said. Your key won't work anymore. I slid an envelope across the table. Statements, timeline, a simple, calm proposal Elena drafted. Separation. He keeps what wasn't spent on us. I keep the house, the dog, and my peace. No insults, no dramatic fonts, just paper. His phone buzzed on the table, another decline or a message from a woman learning how expensive a lie can be. He stared down at it like it would translate itself into something survivable. I felt no triumph. I felt clean. The next days became a kind of deep clean for my life. Work, dog walks, a safety fund. One conversation with my principal where she said, "Take what you need." And I discovered that taking something you need can feel like a skill you learned too late. I boxed up photos that made my eyes hurt and kept the ones that still matched my insides. I slept with the bedroom door open to the hallway like the house, and I were learning each other's breathing again. He rotated through the standard 4. Anger, charm, history, promise. I let each one pass in my inbox and used only 6 words in reply whenever he tried to dislodge me. Please put it in writing. Elena filed our papers. We divided what was fair. No fireworks. Signatures. Keys. A few quiet tears in my car where only the dog had to witness the face I keep folded up for emergencies. On the day a judge stamped the thing that used to be a future, I changed the sheets, bought a bag of lemons because they kept looking like small suns, and moved the couch 2 inches so it sat in the middle again. I made Thursday pasta and ate at the table with the good fork. I set the joint account to close at the end of the month and walked the dog around the block. My steps in a rhythm I recognized from before. I thought love would keep someone honest. That would be a neat ending. But the truth is, living is messier and better than neat. The plan is where dignity begins. The rest takes time. I know the structure wants the turn next. The moment I stop being the person braced for impact and start being the person who chooses where to stand. But I want to set one more scene before the turn, because this is the part no one gives enough space. The evenings right after the truth arrives and the house sounds new, the click of the thermostat, the hum of the fridge, the surprise of your own voice saying out loud, "I'm okay," and realizing you mean it. Not because nothing hurts, but because everything is finally honest. I set my phone to do not disturb after 9. I taped Elena's sentence inside a cabinet door so I'd see it while reaching for cinnamon. I put my ring in a small ceramic dish and noticed how a ring is shaped like a boundary when it's not on a finger. I went to school and taught the 7th graders a round called Dona Nobis Pacem, and when their voices finally braided together, I thought, this is the sound I want in my house. So, the turn. The turn is smaller than people think. It isn't a revenge plot with slow-motion walks and a soundtrack. The turn is a quiet decision you make in the morning before your coffee cools. I will never again argue with a lie. I will build a life out of things that don't require me to be smaller to fit. I ordered a small safe. I set up a P.O. box because mail should not be a place where bad surprises wait. I froze my credit for 48 hours while I cleaned up the accounts. A pause as powerful as a shout. I sat with Elena for 1 more hour, and we rehearsed sentences for scenarios that try to ambush you in real life. I'll respond by email. That doesn't work for me. No. I practiced them out loud while boiling pasta like a person learning a new piece. Fingers clumsy at first, then sure. He tried one last middle-of-the-night call. I did not pick up. In the morning, I emailed. Please put it in writing. It is not my job to be your audience. He wrote finally a paragraph without flourish. He accepted. He wanted to keep things amicable. I learned that amicable is the word people pick when they want clean paperwork after they made a mess. I sent him 2 dates for the last exchange of items, copied Elena, and copied myself on a quiet promise. I will not spend 1 more hour teaching a man the consequences of his choices. The world does that work for free. The day he came for the last box, I put the dog in the yard so she wouldn't vibrate with my nerves. He stood in the doorway and looked at our couch like it was a person who might sway toward him. He said, "You look good." The way men say when they want to remind you of a story you're not in anymore. I said, "There's water on the counter if you're thirsty," because I refuse to stop being polite in my own house. He lifted the box. He looked around 1 more time. He said, "You don't have to do this." "I already did," I said, and the words clicked into place inside me like a lock turning. He left. He did not slam the door. The silence after was not a vacuum. It was a room filling with air again. That night, I sat on the floor with the dog and a spiral notebook, and I wrote the events in order. Dates, charges, actions, appointments, signatures, so that someday if a story tries to rewrite itself into something flattering, I can hand myself the truth. I slid the notebook into the safe with the papers and the spare key and a single photograph that still feels true. Then I did the smallest, bravest thing. I slept. I woke to sun on the wall, a stripe of gold that looked like it had been waiting for me to notice it. My phone was a dark face on the nightstand. I left it there. I made coffee and drank it by the sink while the dog leaned against my leg like a small, living anchor. The house felt light, like someone opened a window inside my ribs. At school, I stood in front of my 7th graders and taught them how to breathe from their bellies. We practiced long exhales. We practiced not rushing the rests. A boy in the back row cracked a joke that made everyone laugh. And for once, I didn't have to borrow patience from a future version of myself. I had some in stock. Between classes, I checked my email. A message from him sat there like an uninvited guest. It was longer, softer. He wanted to talk without lawyers. He wanted a fresh start. He wrote about our trip to the coast 3 years ago, how we ate fries on the boardwalk and watched a couple get engaged. He wrote memories like coupons he could redeem for my forgiveness. I replied with the sentence that now lives in my mouth like a clean tooth. I will communicate by email and through counsel. Please put it in writing. Elena had told me to expect the nostalgia flood. It's a script, she said. Everyone uses it because it worked once, somewhere, on someone who hadn't yet built a plan. I read his note again and felt the old tug, then felt it pass through me like air through a screen. I closed my laptop and tuned a violin. That afternoon, I ran an errand that felt like a math problem. The boutique listed on the statement, a necklace, not cheap, purchased on the joint card. The return window was still open. I stood at the counter with the receipt in my name and the card in my wallet. I didn't need to say much. The clerk's hands moved through the ritual of scanning and bagging and reversing. Will the refund go back to the original card? Yes, it will. It wasn't revenge. It was correction. Money flows back where it came from when you remove the dams someone built with lies. At home, I set the necklace box on the table with the return slip tucked neatly inside. I took a photo and added it to the folder with the other documents, not because anyone asked me to, but because order has always been my way of telling myself I exist. He called at 9. I didn't answer. He called again at 9:05. I didn't answer. He texted, "This is petty." "I can't believe you, I can," I thought, and brushed my teeth. The next day, Elena sent a draft of the separation agreement with notes as short as a breath. Fair, standard, keep. She flagged the house. "You can keep it. He will protest the equity. We'll propose a buyout using your retirement offset. You've got the statement. He spent marital funds on non-marital purposes. We'll document. Breathe. I breathed. In the evening, I took the dog to the park and threw a ball until her tongue curled. A woman on a bench smiled at me the way people smile when they've read a story in your posture and decided you deserve an easier chapter. I sat beside her while our dogs negotiated in circles. We talked about lettuce that bolts too early and a bakery that slices bread too thick, and it felt like a kind of prayer that didn't need a church. The mistress called again on the third day. New number, same perfume in the voice. "You're embarrassing yourself," she said. "You look pathetic." I looked at the pile of folded laundry on the couch and thought, I've looked pathetic before. I've sobbed in a Target parking lot. I've scraped the burnt part off toast. I've believed someone's Tuesday alibi when it was built out of air. I can survive a stranger thinking I look like anything at all. "There's a formal process now," I said, plain as a pencil. "Please don't contact me again. You can't keep our money," she hissed. "Our?" I repeated, and then ended the call, blocked the number, and wrote down the time. I do not narrate with people who don't think words should have owners. Saturday came and I cleaned the pantry the way people purge an attic after a storm. Measured, a shelf at a time. I threw out spices older than our marriage. I kept the labels. I made a list that started as groceries and turned into something else. Tomatoes, olive oil, dog treats, printer ink, ring sizers for the day I resized the ring into something new, or melted into nothing, paint samples, light bulbs, 3 picture frames, one for my parents, one for the diploma I never framed, one for a blank piece of paper where I can write a sentence I want to see every day. I found 2 letters in the back of a drawer. One was from him, years ago, the kind of card you pick up at a drugstore on the way home when you're trying to be the person the card promises you are. The other was from a student, all caps, spelling wobbly, drawing of a treble clef that looks like a swan. "Thank you for making me believe I can," it said, with a sticker of a shiny star that had lost half its stick. I taped the sticker to my fridge. Sometimes a child's sentence steadies a grown woman's knees. On Monday, a message arrived from HR at his company, a form letter noting a change of emergency contact, initiated by him. It was a small sting like a paper cut. It also freed me from a part of the story I didn't want to carry. I updated my own emergency contacts. Eliza first, my mother second, a neighbor third. I made a folder called "If I Get Hit by a Bus," labeled in bright marker, and put copies of everything inside. I am not superstitious. I am prepared. He tried a new angle midweek. Blame dressed as a TED Talk. He wrote about my coldness, my rigidity, the way I carried receipts like weapons. He used the word control as if he hadn't confused attention with affection and secrecy with independence. My stomach did a small, old flip, the one it does when someone tries to rewrite your history with their font. I forwarded the email to Elena and went for a walk while she replied. When I got back, her response sat like a stone step. "Do not reply. This is positioning. He is building a case that you were withholding. We have the paper. Paper is louder, paper is louder." I wrote it on a sticky note, added it to my kitchen gallery. My fridge was becoming a small museum of sentences that keep me upright. The mediation date landed on a Friday. I took the day off school, left lesson plans organized down to the minute, so the substitute would know when to pass out reads and when to collect music stands. I wore the blouse that makes me feel like a grown woman who doesn't need anyone to co-sign her choices. I brought the folder. I brought a bottle of water. I brought my spine. He arrived with a new haircut and a face that wanted to be read as repentant. The mediator's office smelled like weak tea and carpet. We sat across from each other at a table that had seen this story 100 times. He kept looking at my hands like he was waiting for them to tremble. They didn't. We went line by line. House mine. Dog mine. Retirement offset, here are the statements. Joint debts, split, with his share heavier where the paper showed it should be. I did not mention Kay. Not because she doesn't exist, but because she doesn't belong in rooms where grown-ups do math. He tried to tell a story about the necklace. Elena slid the return receipt forward. He tried to tell a story about the hotel. Elena slid the cancellation policy and the charges into place like dominoes. He tried to tell a story about love. The mediator cleared her throat gently and returned us to the column with numbers. Every time my mouth wanted to explain, I squeezed my knee under the table and thought, paper is louder. Every time his face did that thing where the corners fall just so, I looked at the signed statements. Truth can look boring. Lies always try to look like a movie. We left with a draft that looked like a life I could live in. He stood in the hallway for a second, as if the script called for one last scene, but my part didn't. I pressed the elevator button and watched the numbers over the door glow, steady as a metronome. On the way home, I stopped for paint samples and a lemon tart I didn't need but wanted. The woman behind the bakery counter boxed it like it deserved a stage. At home, I peeled the painter's tape off the rim of a can and brushed a square of new color onto the wall above the couch, a warm neutral that looked like a pause. The dog watched me from the rug, head tilted, as if she approved. That night, I opened the box with the necklace one last time and took out the small paper envelope that holds the receipt. I slipped the box into the bottom of the closet, not as a relic, but as evidence that will live quietly until it isn't needed. I don't need trophies from someone else's bad decisions. The following week, I did something that felt almost like mischief. I logged into our airline rewards account and transferred the points we'd both earned to a ticket in my name. He had used our life to fund romance. I used the residue to purchase a seat to a music teachers conference in a city I've always wanted to see. Legal? Yes. Joint rewards split by agreement? Also yes. Ethical? I'm at peace. I booked a modest hotel with free breakfast, and a pool I planned to float in like a woman who can read a book without checking a door. He sent one last tangled email about forgiveness and closure, and the kids we never had. I read it at my desk after last bell, and then looked up at the posters on my wall. Bach in a powdered wig, a jazz trumpeter mid-note, a quote in block letters. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. I printed his email and slid it into the folder, not because it belonged with the numbers, but because someday I might need to remind myself how much work it takes to make a sentence sound like an apology when it refuses to include the words, "I did this." In the grocery store aisle, I caught myself reaching for the yogurt he likes and laughed out loud. Habits have hands. They keep trying to open doors that aren't there anymore. I put the yogurt back and grabbed the kind with peaches on the bottom. Small rebellions can taste like dessert. A week before the court date, a mutual friend texted to check in. We met for tea on a Sunday afternoon, and I told her the version of the story that belongs to me. The facts, the plan, the papers. She cried. I did not. We hugged in a parking lot, and I went home and took a nap on my sagging couch, the one I keep moving closer to center, as if I'm nudging my own life into alignment one small shove at a time. The morning of court felt like the last mile of a long walk. I put on the blouse again. I set food and water for the dog. I checked my bag twice, then once more, and told myself, enough. In the hallway outside the courtroom, couples sat on benches like bookends, strangers about to become separate stories. We were all quiet in the same way, the way people are in a doctor's waiting room, ready to be told what the next chapter requires. The judge was brisk and human. She looked at the paper, not our faces. She asked if the agreement reflected our wishes. It did. She stamped it. The noise the stamp made surprised me. A dull thump like the sound you hear when a cake settles. That was it. Years and Thursdays and receipts and one ugly necklace turned into a file and a future. We stepped back into the hallway. He reached for my arm without thinking, like a person reaching to steady themselves on a rail they assume is always there. I shifted. His hand didn't find me. Outside, the air felt newly invented. I drove to school and sat in my empty classroom and listened to the hum of the building as if I could put my ear to the world and hear it breathing. I took out a pad of staff paper and wrote a line of notes that matched the rhythm of my heart. I am not a composer, but I wanted to see what my pulse looks like. After school, I went home and changed the sheets again. Not because they needed it, but because I like the message it sends to my skin. Fresh. I sliced a lemon and set it on the counter because the smell makes my brain say light. I moved the couch 2 inches more and put the new paint color where the wall meets the window. I hung the frame with the blank paper and wrote, in my neat teacher hand, a line to live by this month. I choose what I carry. That evening, I sat on the floor with a shoebox of photos. I kept the ones with my parents' hands in them. My sister's crooked grin. My dog as a puppy asleep inside a sneaker. I put a small stack of wedding pictures in the bottom of the box and wrote on the lid, "Open when this stops hurting." I slid the box onto a shelf I can reach without needing a ladder. I prefer my grief within arm's length. I don't like it falling on me from above. He sent one last text. Good luck. I stared at it and realized that this, too, is a script. The curtain call where the actor nods to the audience and says a line that makes him feel noble. I did not respond. I put my phone face down and took the dog for a walk in the soft dark. Porch lights blinked on one by one like metronomes set to different songs. Somewhere, a teenager practiced trumpet. The note wobbled and then steadied. I smiled and kept walking. The conference came. The plane lifted and I looked down at the city that held a version of me I'm not taking with me. At the hotel, I floated in the pool until my fingers wrinkled and my thoughts smoothed out. I went to workshops about breathing and posture and how to teach kids to own their sound. A conductor with bright eyes said, "The goal isn't to play louder, it's to play truer." I wrote it down and put a star beside it. On the last evening, a small ensemble played in a ballroom lit like a slow sunset. The violist closed her eyes during a phrase that sounded like a person walking home after a long day. I closed mine too. For a moment, nothing in me felt like ex-wife or betrayed or lesson plan. I felt like a woman in a chair listening to a song that remembered me before I met him and will remember me after. Back home, I stood in my doorway with my suitcase and the sensation, finally, of arriving where I already am. My house smelled like lemon and dog and paint drying, a bouquet of new. I unpacked slowly, putting each thing in its place, the way you set a table for someone you love. I made pasta because it was Thursday. I ate at the table with the good fork again. I put my phone in a drawer and let the night be a room without alarms. There's a thing that happens after the papers, after the plane, after the paint. Silence shows you the parts of yourself you left in drawers, because you thought keeping them hidden would help someone else feel bigger. I took my cello out, tuned it carefully, and played scales until the dog lay at my feet with her head on my ankle, the way she used to when I practiced on Sundays. My fingers hurt. It felt perfect. He exists in my city. She does too. Sometimes I drive past a restaurant and see a shape in a window that could be his shoulder, and I keep driving. Sometimes I think about the necklace sitting in a dark space waiting for a thrift store to give it a second life on a person who will never know it's first. Sometimes I wake at 3 and the old panic paces my hallway. I get up, tap the safe with my knuckles, and the sound reminds me. The paper is here. The plan is here. I am here. A month later, a package arrived addressed to me, my name spelled right. The return address a boutique I'd never visited. Inside, a small card that said, "We received a request to update the authorized user on your account. We require your signature." I hadn't made the request. I called. I asked questions. They apologized and froze the change. I added the letter to my folder. I revised my passwords again. I made tea. This is the maintenance part of peace. It's less cinematic than revenge, but it tastes better in the morning. Elena emailed to close the file. "You did well," she wrote. "You kept your center." I replied with more gratitude than words, and then walked to the hardware store to buy a new switch plate for the light we'd promised to fix, and never did. I swapped it out in 10 minutes. Sometimes the future is just a working porch light. In class, we prepared for the spring concert. I picked pieces that stretched them but wouldn't break them. I told them the truth about performance. You will make mistakes, and the thing that matters is your return. We practiced walking onto the stage, standing tall, nodding to the audience, and taking that first breath together. I told them, "Look up. The room wants you to do well." They believed me because they could hear I believed it too. On concert night, I stood in the wings and watched them find their marks. A mother in the front row dabbed her eyes. A grandfather filmed with the steadiness of someone who knows he's keeping an archive. They played. They were not perfect. They were good. The applause felt like a tide. My principal squeezed my hand. I thought about the boy who cracked jokes, and the girl whose bow arm used to shake, and the moment, months ago, when I decided to build a life I could stand in without holding my breath. After, parents brought flowers. A student handed me a single lemon wrapped in tissue paper because she'd heard me mention I liked the smell. I laughed, then cried, then laughed again. I put the lemon on my desk and knew I'd remember its bright weight longer than any bouquet. On the way home, I drove the long way to avoid a restaurant I don't need to see. The moon was a perfect thumbprint. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light glowed like a quiet yes. I carried the flowers inside and put them in a jar. Not because I couldn't find a vase, but because a jar looked exactly right. There are still forms to file and rooms to paint, and mornings when my chest feels like a room with the heat turned up too high. There are also evenings like this, my dog asleep in a circle of moonlight on the rug, my house centered, my fridge a museum of the sentences that kept me steady, my ring cooling in a dish like a planet I no longer orbit. People will tell this story about me. Some will leave out the boring parts because they think only fireworks are worth mentioning. But here is what I know. The quiet actions built the bridge. The list saved me. The returns and the refunds and the lines drawn in emails mattered more than any speech I might have delivered into the phone at midnight. I didn't win a battle. I exited a bad economy, and that, more than anything, feels like relief I can spend. I didn't notice the exact day the house stopped sounding like a waiting room and started sounding like a home. But one morning in late spring, I opened the window, and the air came in as something friendly. The dog stretched with both paws in the sun, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel like I had to race my thoughts to get ahead of the day. Bills were set to the new account. Alerts pinged and then quieted as the noise of unknown charges disappeared from my phone. The safe under my bed held paper that could carry the story without me. The ring sat in its dish like a coin I hadn't decided how to spend. At school, we boxed up the music stands for summer break and counted how many reeds we'd burned through. I labeled the shelves the way I label everything, but this time I added a shelf with a new label. To try next year, it felt good to promise a future to myself, even in marker. The ex did one more lap. He sent a longer email with headings, like a report. Accountability, context, regret. He included sentences crafted to slide under the door of my sympathy. He wanted me to meet him in the tone he picked. I forwarded it to Elena and went for a walk while she read it. Her reply was clean, acknowledged, no response necessary. He is building a narrative. We remain in facts. I'll send a final letter regarding outstanding reimbursements tied to marital waste. Expect pushback, then compliance. Pushback arrived within hours like a storm on a weather app. He argued percentages, he argued intent, he argued me. Elena logged the arguments and sent back a chart that looked like a grocery list with numbers. Columns decided what feelings tried to blur. I kept my world small that week. Work, dog, meals that took 20 minutes, 10 minutes of stretching before bed because my body had been saving up knots. I fixed the squeak in the hallway door with a drop of oil and cried standing there with the screwdriver. Not because of the door, but because the sound of it not squeaking anymore felt like a kind of permission. On Saturday, I drove to a jeweler who works out of a studio behind an old house. Eliza told me she turns old rings into new stories. The studio smelled like metal and lemon cleaner. The jeweler had kind eyes and careful hands. I put the ring on the counter between us like you lay down a ticket you're not taking anymore. Do you want to sell it? She asked. I want it to stop being a circle, I said. I want it to mean something I can wear without my stomach remembering. She showed me sketches. A small treble clef, a simple bar pendant stamped with a date, a lemon slice, delicate as a coin. I laughed. I have lemons in my house already, I said. Let's do the treble clef. She weighed the ring. She talked about melting points and alloys. I nodded and held the small grief of it. How something that once meant forever could become a note I hang at my throat. It'll take a couple of weeks, she said. When you pick it up, bring a line of music you love. I can engrave tiny, right on the back. I drove home light, not triumphant. Just accurate Monday. A letter came from Elena to him and copied to me. Demand for reimbursement, which is a dry phrase that tastes like justice if you hold it long enough. It listed the hotel, the necklace that I'd returned, the flights for two, the resort purchases, and the dinners that were not with clients. It subtracted what had already been corrected and asked for the rest, line by line. He replied with heat, then cooled. The cooling looked a lot like reading. A week later, a wire landed in my account. Money that had been noise became quiet. I transferred a portion to savings and used the rest to patch a practical hole. New tires, a dentist bill I had postponed, a deposit on summer camp for a student whose mother had asked if there was a scholarship and hoped for a yes. I did not tell anyone online. I didn't leave a review of his character on the internet. I wrote the wire amount on a sticky note, pressed it into the folder, and told the dog, "We're okay." The mistress found a new angle through a new number. I answered, because I was expecting a call from a parent whose contact I hadn't saved yet. "You think you won," she said without hello. "You stole." "I documented," I said, "because that's the difference. Do not contact me again. You'll end up alone," she snapped. I looked around my quiet kitchen. Lemons in a bowl, paint chips taped to the wall, the dog water bowl half full. "I'm already here," I said softly. Ended the call, blocked the number, and emailed Elena in 3 lines. New harassment. Same person. Number blocked. Elena replied with 2. Noted. Paper is louder. June crept in, soft at first, then full. Without the constant storm checking, I had time I didn't know where to put. I tried putting it into sleep, into reading, into making a playlist that began with Dona Nobis Pacem and ended with a song I used to dance to alone in college when my roommate was out and the world felt both huge and kind. I also had energy, the leftover kind that used to go into arguing. I gave it jobs. Saturday mornings became project hours. Week 1, patch and paint the nicked baseboards. Week 2, plant herbs in a long box outside the kitchen window. Basil, mint, rosemary that looked like tiny trees. Week 3, switch the pictures in the hallway so the photos of my parents' hands, on a canoe oar, on a pie crust, on my shoulder, lined the wall toward my bedroom like benedictions. Twice I heard from people who had heard from him. "He's hurting," they said, as if I didn't know what pain felt like, as if pain returns ownership of what you broke. I let the messages sit. I wrote them a version of the same reply when I was steady. "I'm sorry he's hurting. I hope he heals. I am not the place for that." I went to a free clinic at the community center called Boundaries 101 because the title made me laugh. The second hour made me cry. A therapist with a voice like a good alto said, "You can't heal in the room that made you sick." And everyone wrote it down like we'd just been handed a map. I put it on my fridge that night, right under Paper is Louder. The jeweler called at the end of the month. "Your piece is ready," she said, and I felt my chest answer yes. I drove over at lunch. The treble clef was small and clean, a line of metal held steady in a shape I've drawn 1,000 times on a whiteboard. On the back, tiny but legible, she'd engraved the first 4 notes of a song I love, the hymn the kids sang in 3 parts when I needed to remember what hope sounds like. I paid and fastened it at my throat in the parking lot, catching my reflection in the car window. I expected a sob. Instead, I felt a click. The shape was no longer a circle. I went back to school and taught a class of 8th graders who were already half gone into summer. One of them handed me a sloppily folded thank you note on the way out, and I pressed it into my pocket like a talisman. Around that time, I learned something that would have ruined me months earlier and barely moved me now. A mutual acquaintance pulled me aside in the grocery store and said there was a rumor at his office about expense reviews and compliance trainings and how someone got sloppy. I shrugged. It wasn't my problem. I had my own compliance to tend to. Sleep, water, the number of sticky notes a fridge can hold before it becomes a manifesto. July brought heat and long light. I took the dog to the beach at the lake and watched her discover waves with the focus of a scientist. I let myself do nothing for long stretches, which is harder than it looks if you come from a family that scores worth in tasks completed. I adjusted my budget and set my retirement to put a little more away each month. A tiny vote for future me who will not be surprised by the bill. I also met with a financial counselor at the credit union because I wanted a person who thinks in spreadsheets to look at mine. She showed me how to set up a sinking fund for house repairs and how to hide the savings account from the main screen so I wouldn't rate it when the wrong commercial made me sad. She didn't congratulate me for leaving. She congratulated me for labeling the buckets clearly. It felt like the right currency. He appeared exactly once in my physical life that summer. I was loading the dog into the back seat outside the hardware store. He stepped out of a car I didn't recognize and said my name like it still lived in his mouth. I turned. I didn't step back. I didn't step toward. I put my hand on the warm roof of my car and let my fingers feel the metal. He looked thinner. He looked like a person rehearsing a speech who had misplaced page 2. "I'm sorry," he said. It was almost a whisper. "I hope you do something useful with that," I said. The words came out even. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't soft. I was a person making a boundary in the air between us so the world would know where I end. He asked how I was. I said, "Good." He asked about the dog. I said, "She's perfect." He looked at the necklace. "New?" he asked, like he had a right to the story of it. "Old metal, new shape," I said, then opened my car door. "I need to go. Please put anything else in writing." He nodded. He didn't reach. He didn't follow. He walked away carrying something I couldn't see. I sat in my car with the AC on high and counted my breaths. 4 in, 8 out, until my body remembered we were safe. A week later, Elena sent the final notice of closure. File archived. House title recorded in my name alone. Joint account closed. My phone buzzed twice with bank confirmations. I took a screenshot of each and moved them to the folder. It's possible I will never open that folder again. It's possible I will open it in 10 years on a day when my brain tries to edit history to make it tidier or meaner than it was. Either way, I have it. The paper is louder. I spent a Saturday painting the bedroom the color of quiet. I pulled the bed away from the wall and found dust bunnies the size of puppies and smiled at the way houses confess. I moved my nightstand to the other side of the bed because I wanted my first reach in the morning to be toward the window, not my phone. I put a small plant beside the alarm clock and learned to water it on Wednesdays. In August, I took a short trip to a cabin 2 hours away that allowed dogs and didn't have a television. I packed 3 paperbacks and more snacks than any sane person needs. I sat on a wooden deck and let the afternoon tilt toward evening without telling it how to go. I wrote a letter to the version of me who thought she was too old to start over and told her the truth. You are not starting over. You are starting true. On the last day, it rained the way summer rains do. Big drops, quick roads. The dog and I drove home under a sky that kept changing its mind. When we pulled into the driveway, my porch light blinked on, steady and polite. I carried my bag inside and put it on the bed, then unpacked slowly, putting each thing back where it belonged. No rushing, no chaos. Just the kind of order that doesn't punish. School started up again, new kids with new shoes and big eyes. On the first day, I told them my classroom rules. We breathe, we count, we listen while others play. We do not apologize for taking up space with our sound. A small boy with nervous hands raised his hand. What if I mess up? He asked. You will, I said, and the whole room relaxed. That's how we know we're playing. That afternoon, I took the old couch cushions to be restuffed. The upholsterer told me to come back in a week. When I did, the couch sat firm and balanced in the middle of the room. It felt like a metaphor someone might call corny, but I don't care. My house sits right where I placed it. So do I. In September, the boutique sent a letter to confirm the authorized user attempt had not gone through. They apologized for the inconvenience in a font that tried to be kind. I slid the letter into the folder, then poured a glass of water and toasted the invisible work that prevents disasters from growing up to be crises. Eliza came over one Friday with tomatoes from her garden and a bottle of wine we didn't finish. We ate on the floor like college students and talked about jobs and dogs and the show we both pretend we don't love. She looked around and said, You didn't get mean. You got organized? That's my superpower, I said. Labels, we laughed. She studied my face. You look even, she said. Even is underrated. Even is the place from which every generous thing I've ever done has been possible. Even is what I built when I decided to stop shouting into wind and start arranging my own shelves. I still get angry sometimes. I am allowed. It lives in me like weather. Arrives, pours, leaves the air a little cleaner. On those days I walk longer. I play my cello without the sheet music and let it sound messy until it doesn't. I take one photo out of the box and look for one good thing in it that belongs to me alone. The way my hair caught the light, the joke my sister told right after, the lemon slice on the dish near the cake no one cut correctly. The necklace sits cool against my skin when I stand at the board and draw a treble clef in dry erase ink, showing 6th graders where the line curls. It's a shape you can trust, I tell them. It always begins here. I tap the spot on the staff with the marker. They watch, they try, they fail and try again. The dog waits for me at home. The couch doesn't sag. The lemons on the counter glow like punctuation. One night, months after the stamp and the wire and the paint, I woke at 2 and realized I hadn't thought about them in days. Not from avoidance, not from a high wall, but because my life had filled the room. I lay there in the dark and let the fact land. The quiet did not feel empty. It felt earned. I have been told that my calm is a kind of revenge. Maybe. It is also a habit now, a practice that goes on the calendar like any other rehearsal. I still choose it when the phone buzzes with a number I don't know, or when a friend says she saw him across a room looking like a man who wants to pivot into a softer scene. I choose it because I like how my house sounds when I do. The plan was the beginning. The rest looks like this: A binder in a safe, a porch light that works, paint that's actually dry before I touch it, a necklace that used to be a circle now shaped like the first sign a musician learns to draw. Justice didn't need an audience. It needed a checklist, a lawyer who speaks in verbs, a bank that sends alerts, a teacher who knows how to count the rests, a woman who decided no is a complete sentence even when her voice shakes the first few times she uses it. I know there will be more maintenance. There always is. Cars need oil, credit needs monitoring, students need to be reminded to bring their instruments, hearts need sleep, and vitamins, and sometimes a good cry on the kitchen floor where the tile is cool. I am not afraid of maintenance. I am grateful for tasks that keep me close to my life. Tonight I will make pasta because it's Thursday. I will eat it with the good fork. I will wipe the counter and put the towel on the bar straight. I will turn off the lamp and say the small prayer I say now without thinking. Let tomorrow be honest. Summer leaned into the edges of everything. Long light in my kitchen, slow evenings that didn't need a plan. I planted the herbs deeper and learned how much water basil likes. I put a small table by the window and made it my letter-writing station. A place where bills get paid, and thank you notes get written, and nothing chaotic is allowed to sit for long. One afternoon, the secretary buzzed my classroom to say Akara was in the main office asking for me. I stared at the phone, then at the sticky note on my cabinet door. I told the secretary I wasn't available to meet and asked her to provide our district's policy. All personal matters go through the front office and, if necessary, the police liaison. I emailed Elena. She came to my work. Elena replied with a draft cease and desist before my last period ended. Facts are a shelter. So are policies. That evening, I wrote 3 lines in my notebook. What I can control, what I can't, what I will do anyway. Under can, I wrote passwords, porch light, savings, boundaries. Under can't, I wrote other people's choices, rumors, office politics. Under will, I wrote teach, walk, sleep, eat, breathe, practice, sing, be kind to myself on purpose. A week later, the school sent out a form about visitors and decorum before our open house. It was routine, and also not. The world had closed a small door for me without me asking. I thanked our principal in a short email that didn't need to explain why gratitude was appropriate. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a line I saved. We protect our own. On a Saturday, I drove to the thrift store with 2 bags of clothes and a box of things that no longer match the shape of my life. On a shelf near the register, a stranger picked up a necklace that looked almost like the one I'd returned and held it to the light. She smiled. She bought it. I felt an unexpected lift in my chest. Not everything has to carry the same story forward. The practical justice kept arriving the way mail does. Quiet, stamped, sorted. HR at his company reached out to Elena for verification of dates in relation to non-business expenses. I didn't ask for details. I don't need to know how a system disciplines its own. The wire for reimbursement had come and gone. The accounts were closed. That chapter could finish elsewhere, without me as a character. At home, I kept my promises to myself. Maintenance Monday, tiny task Tuesday, wishful Wednesday, one small thing I want soon, not someday. Throwaway Thursday, 1 item out of the house. Fix it Friday, 1 small repair. It sounds silly when I write it out. It saved me. No single day held my whole future. It held one job I could do without consulting a broken past. One Thursday, Eliza brought over a new friend from her office. We ate pasta and told the kind of stories women tell when the door is closed, and the dog has decided everyone who's coming is here. The friend was quiet until the plates were pushed back. I think my husband is cheating, she said into her water glass like a confession. The room went soft. I didn't give her a speech. I gave her a list. Direct deposit, alerts, passwords, credit freeze, copy everything. Please put it in writing. The lawyer's name. A sticky note with paper is louder. Her shoulders lowered with every practical instruction. You're not alone, I said. She nodded and pressed the sticky note flat against the table as if to iron it into her bones. The first day back for teachers arrived heavy with humidity and possibility. I set out folders, tuned the instruments that squeak most, and wrote the year's first sentence on the board. We make the sound we can stand to hear. It's a motto, a wish, and a warning. The kids read it and don't understand yet. They will. On open house night, parents filed past like a parade led by awkward trumpets. My ex did not appear. I didn't realize I'd braced for it until my shoulders dropped halfway through the evening. The parent liaison, An older man with gentle eyes stood in my doorway for most of the night like a lighthouse. He didn't say anything beyond hello. I didn't either. Sometimes presence is the whole job. In early fall, the dog and I joined a Saturday morning routine at the cafe on the corner. The barista learned my order. The regulars learned my dog's name. I learned to take up a small square of table without arranging my face for anyone. A woman with paint on her forearms sat down one morning and asked if I wanted to join a community orchestra. "Second cello," she said. "We need steady." I heard my own laugh out loud. "Steady is what I have at wholesale prices." I said yes. Rehearsals were on Tuesdays in a room that smelled like old wood and new coffee. The first night felt like walking back into a house you moved out of in college and finding your sweater still on a chair. My hands remembered more than I expected. My brain forgave the parts they forgot. We played simple pieces at first. The conductor counted us in with the confidence of someone who believes that amateur doesn't mean lesser. It means love. 2 weeks into rehearsals, an email arrived from him with the subject line, "Acknowledgement." The body was 3 sentences. He had let things get out of hand. He wished it had been different. He respects my boundaries. No request for reply. No questions. I forwarded it to Elena and filed it in a folder called Endings. For the first time, the sight of his name in my inbox didn't make my stomach tighten. It made nothing happen at all. Then came a day that would have broken me a year earlier. A parent arrived late to pick up a 6th grader, face apologetic and frantic. "His father and I are splitting," she blurted, as if strangers deserve footnotes for tardiness. "He doesn't want to bring his violin home anymore." I walked the violin out with the boy. "It's okay if music lives here for a while," I told him, and we set the case gently in the storage room. I asked him if he wanted to learn how to count the rests on paper with no sound. He nodded. We sat together at my desk and counted silence. It felt holy. That night, I printed a simple checklist titled Practical Peace and set a stack on the front counter of the community center with permission from the director. It listed the steps that had saved me. No names, no story. Just boxes to check and a line at the bottom. "You are not dramatic. You are careful. Take what you need." I checked back a week later. The stack was gone. Kara called one more time from a number that came up as unknown. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was more tired than mean. She wanted me to know they were working through things. I deleted it and felt nothing but a quiet wish that someday she will want more than a man who subtracts. The first concert with the community orchestra fell on a Sunday afternoon that smelled like soup and rain. We played Simple Gifts, which is overused for a reason. The last chord hung in the hall like a held breath and then let go together. People clapped. No one knew the shape of my ring under the necklace. No one knew about the safe under my bed. They only knew what they heard. A line steady enough to lean on. After the concert, I walked home and opened the binder in the safe. I read the first page, my own handwriting, the day I wrote evidence, money, legal, logistics, plan. I touched the tabs. I closed it. I slid it back and locked the door. The lock clicked with a satisfying certainty, like a metronome at the right tempo. Then I went to the kitchen and set out pasta for Thursday, even though it was Sunday, because traditions can be moved when you're the one holding them. A few days later, a final letter arrived from the county recorder. The deed was filed. The house title was officially simply mine. I held the paper over the kitchen table and felt the floor steady under my feet in a way that had nothing to do with gravity. I didn't frame the deed. I slipped it into the safe and framed the porch light. Instead, by turning it on at dusk and noticing how it made the door look like a welcome, Eliza. And I sat outside that night with tea and mugs and the dog sprawled between us. "What would you tell Laura from 2 years ago?" she asked, not unkindly, not like a test. I looked at the lemons on the counter through the window, at the necklace against the soft of my throat, at the door I had locked and unlocked 1,000 times. "I'd tell her there's a difference between staying and being kept," I said. "And that steady isn't small. It's strong." We were quiet for a while, 2 women on a small porch with a working light, the neighborhood humming around us like a well-tuned section. Inside, my phone buzzed once with a calendar reminder. "Community rehearsal tomorrow. Bring pencils." I smiled. I love that kind of future. The first cool morning of fall smelled like pencils and apples. I opened every window, let the house stretch. The dog stood at the screen and watched leaves tumble like notes. And for once, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was just waiting for the kettle to sing. School gave me its usual tide. Kids who needed reads and kids who needed eye contact and kids who needed to sit by the door because loud rooms are a lot. I moved through it with a steadiness that felt earned. When I told them, count the rests, I was telling the truth twice. At home, I kept my tiny systems running. Maintenance Monday, tiny task Tuesday, wishful Wednesday, throwaway Thursday, fix it Friday. None of it glamorous, all of it mine. I recocked the bathtub, replaced 2 outlet covers, and finally oiled the back gate so it stopped complaining about opening. Every check in every box made a small, satisfying noise inside me. Elena sent a final email. Case closed. 2 words, 10,000 breaths. I replied thank you, and bought her a gift card with a handwritten note that just said, "Your verbs saved me." Kara never came back to the school. The office policy wore a quiet badge on my behalf. I didn't chase updates about them. I didn't Google her name or his. I let the story shrink to the size it deserved, a past event with paperwork attached. The community orchestra slid into a groove. Tuesday nights became a place I didn't have to lead. I could be one sound among many, the low line that holds the room together while the melody shows off. The conductor would smile when we landed a phrase, and sometimes, driving home, I'd think, this is what my life feels like now. No solo, no scramble, just a part that matters, and a line I can carry without shaking. On a Saturday, the community center director called. "Those checklists you left," she said. "People keep asking for more. Would you be willing to run a little workshop? Nothing fancy, just what you wish someone had told you early." I said yes before my throat could get in the way. We picked a date. I titled it, Practical Peace. I made slides with fonts that didn't shout and put the steps in big. Boxes, documents, money, boundaries, safety, sentences. I added resources and numbers that work at 2 a.m. I practiced in my kitchen like a nervous student, talking to the fridge, to the lemons, to the dog. 10 women showed up. One man sat in the back with a baseball cap crushed in his hands. I told them facts. I told them, please put it in writing, and paper is louder, and you aren't dramatic, you're careful. I did not tell my story like a bonfire. I offered it like a folded map. We ended with a small exercise I stole from my classroom. Everyone wrote one sentence they could actually say out loud, then said it into the room. The air changed shape with every sentence spoken. At the end, the man in the hat nodded once to me and once to the door, like both were lifelines. We stacked chairs together. I went home and cried into a clean towel. Not because I was sad, but because relief has to leave the body somehow. My mother came to visit in October with a casserole and a stack of knitted dishcloths. We walked the dog and she pretended not to study my face. Over tea, she said, "You look like yourself." And I surprised us both with how fast I said, "I am." On a cold Thursday, I replaced the front doormat. The old one had said, "Welcome" in letters worn down by a decade of feet. The new one says hello, like an ongoing conversation. Small difference, large feeling. I wiped my shoes, opened my own door, and stepped into the light I pay for. The holidays edged in. At school, I taught carols and pieces from traditions I didn't grow up with. We practiced how to bow together without knocking instruments. The 6th graders learned to listen for each other so the bells didn't rush. In the orchestra, our winter program included a piece that made me cry in the second measure during rehearsal. By the concert, I could play it without my hands betraying me. On a Saturday in December, I hosted pasta night for 3 friends. Nothing elaborate. Garlic and olive oil, a big salad, bread still warm on the middle rack. We ate at the table with mismatched chairs and laughed until one of us wheezed. When they left, I washed dishes to a playlist that still starts with Dona Nobis Pacem. I wiped the counter and hung the towel straight on the bar and thought, this is not revenge. This is a life. The ring came back one more time. Not as metal, but as a letter from the jeweler. Thought you'd like a copy of the original weight and the new measurement. A number turned into a note. I tucked the paper into the safe and touched the necklace at my throat. The engraving on the back still made me smile. I didn't need anyone else to know what it said. The ex sent a Christmas card addressed in his tidy block print. The envelope sat on my counter for an hour. I put it in the recycling, unopened, and felt proud for the most boring reason. I let a boundary do its job while I did mine. January brought gray days and predictable weather. Predictable felt like luxury. I put a little extra in savings each paycheck. Not because I was afraid, but because having a cushion gave me the kind of courage you can only rent when you're broke. The dog turned 7, and we celebrated with a ridiculous cupcake from the pet store and a long walk in the brittle sun. In February, the 6th grader with the storage room violin started taking it home again. He smiled a lot more. I didn't ask why. In March, the community center asked if I would run Practical Peace quarterly. I said yes and started a folder called Templates, so I could print without thinking next time. In April, a parent emailed to say her sister had used my checklist to leave quietly and was now boring and safe, which she said like a compliment. It is. One afternoon, the county recorder emailed an auto reminder for property taxes with my name alone at the top. I paid it like a person paying for her own roof, which I am. A plumber came to fix a slow drain and asked, "Is the owner home?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Can I speak to them?" And I said, "You are." And we both grinned. Spring concert season returned. Backstage, I told the kids my usual speech about courage in return. Parents filed in, coats and programs and the hush that comes before a first note. We played. I watched a girl who used to shake play a phrase with her shoulders down and her chin proud. The room clapped like a tide. I bowed like a person who knows her job and goes home to a house that knows her name. The last day of school always comes like a bus that doesn't stop. It just slows and expects you to jump. We stacked chairs, inventoried stands, collected reeds, taped boxes shut. I wrote "Try next year" on a big label and slapped it on a cabinet with a satisfaction I didn't bother to hide. On the first day of summer, I moved the couch a final inch. Centered. I stood in the doorway and looked at my living room the way you look at a finished puzzle and think about the stubborn pieces that fought you and how much sweeter they made the click. Late June, I went back to the coast alone. The boardwalk where we ate fries once. The pier where a stranger proposed to another stranger. I stayed at a simple inn with clean sheets and a balcony the size of a book. I watched the morning unspool. I bought fries because I wanted them. I walked the pier and saw 3 different couples take photos of each other with their chins tilted just so. I hoped good things for them because kindness doesn't cost extra when you've paid your biggest bill already. On the drive home, I thought about the word forgiven. It didn't land. The word finished did. Not bitter, not soft. Done like a door that closes and latches because that's what doors are for. When I got back, there was a card from the credit union. "Congratulations on 1 year with your new account. Funny what institutions mark." I put it in the recycling and sat on my porch and listened to the neighborhood. Kids on bikes, someone learning guitar 2 houses over, the easy argument of starlings. My porch light clicked on at dusk like it trusted me to want light when it got dark. I still open the safe sometimes. I still touch the binder. I still count breaths when a number I don't know calls. But most days the folder stays closed and the phone stays face down, and the only counting I do is in measures, and the only lists I make are for groceries, and the only alarms that go off are the ones I set on purpose. The dog and I have our roots. The herbs thrive in their long box. The lemon bowl stays full because I keep buying them. On Thursdays, I make pasta and eat it with the good fork at the table that has a groove where a plate has always wobbled, and now wobbles a little less because I put a felt pad on one leg. I am not brave every minute. I am not wise on command. But I am consistent. And that has turned out to be the kind of power that doesn't need an audience and never asks for applause. When my students graduate, I tell them to learn the shape of their own sound so they can recognize it when the world gets loud. I say, play truer, not louder. And sometimes I hear my own voice, and it sounds like a woman who finally took her own advice. So here is the ending, as simple as a scale I can play without looking. I did not win. I did not lose. I chose, and then I kept choosing, and my life kept choosing me back. Sometimes justice looks like a ledger balancing. Sometimes it looks like a porch light that turns on when you come home. And sometimes, on good Thursdays when the pot boils and the room smells like lemon and the house sits centered, justice looks like breath moving through a body that finally belongs to itself. I didn't get even. I got free.
Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Hopefully, every moment in the story has touched your heart, brought you some reflection, some emotion, and hope. Thank you for taking the time to experience it with us, and hope that each next story will always accompany you on your life journey.